My name is Sarah, and I'm 29. 6 months ago, I handcrafted a gift for my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. They opened it in front of all their friends and family, laughed at it, and called it cheap and quaint. They mocked me for not having the money to buy a proper gift. Then a Navy commander in full dress uniform showed up on their doorstep the next day and warned them that if they touched that gift again, they'd be facing the federal government. The first front was in places most people only see on the news in dusty deserts, humid jungles, and remote forward operating bases. For 8 years, I served in the United States Marine Corps. I learned discipline, honor, and what it means to be part of something bigger than myself. I found a family in my fellow Marines, a bond forged in hardship and absolute trust, where your word was your bond and your actions defined you. The second front, ironically, was the home I grew up in. There was no respect for my uniform, no understanding of my sacrifice. There, I wasn't Sergeant Sarah Jensen, a leader of Marines. I was just the other child, the daughter who chose a path my parents, David and Carol, could never comprehend. For them, success had only one metric: money, and by that standard, I was a perpetual, glaring failure. My brother, Mark, 2 years my senior, was the embodiment of all their dreams. He graduated from a prestigious business school, worked for a Wall Street investment firm, and drove a sleek BMW that was always freshly detailed. Family dinners were less about connection and more like Mark's quarterly earnings reports. He'd hold court, talking about trades, bonuses, and lavish vacations to street bards. My parents would listen with rapturous pride, their faces glowing, hanging on his every word as if it were scripture. The clinking of their wine glasses was like a constant applause for his achievements. When it was my turn to share, a polite but heavy silence would fall. What could I say? That I'd just completed a grueling survival training course where I learned to navigate by the stars? That I'd learned to field strip a Humvee engine in the pitch dark with nothing but muscle memory? That I felt a surge of profound pride after leading my squad through a complex and dangerous mission? My achievements couldn't be quantified in dollars and cents, and therefore, in their eyes, they didn't count. "Oh, that's nice, dear," my mother would say, her voice flat with disinterest, her eyes already glazing over before immediately turning back to Mark. "Now, Mark, tell me more about your new condo. Does it have a view of the park?" This injustice was an old, festering wound. I remember the day I came home from my first deployment. I hadn't seen them in 14 months. I'd spent the entire flight home imagining the reunion, the hugs, the tears, maybe even a simple welcome home banner. Instead, I walked into a house buzzing with preparations for Mark's promotion party. My father clapped me on the shoulder absently, his eyes darting around the room. "Welcome home, Sarah. You're just in time. Mark just made senior vice president." The entire evening was a toast to Mark. Not a single person, not even my own parents, asked me about my tour, about what I had seen, or what I had endured. I stood there, in my uniform, an alien in my own home, feeling more invisible than I ever had in camouflage. After I was honorably discharged, I decided to pursue my other passion: woodworking. My hands, which had grown accustomed to the cold steel of a rifle and the grease of engine parts, found a quiet peace in shaping wood. I rented a small workshop and started a business making custom furniture. It was humble, but it was mine. It was real, tangible, and it brought me a profound sense of joy. To my family, it was just another strange hobby. "You really think you can make a living hammering tables together?" my mother asked one evening, her voice dripping with skepticism as she wiped an imaginary speck of dust off her granite countertop. "Why don't you just ask Mark to get you a job at his firm? A real desk job, with benefits and a 401 kelvins." I tried to explain that there was more to life than a salary, that there was value in honor, in service, in creating something beautiful and tangible with your own two hands. I tried to tell them that I finally felt like myself, but my words were like a foreign language to them, abstract concepts they couldn't grasp. They only saw a 9-year-old daughter who lived in a small rental, drove a beat-up pickup truck, and had no prospects. They didn't see the strength the Corps had forged in me, or the quiet confidence my workshop gave me. They saw a problem to be fixed, a deviation from the path of success Mark had so perfectly paved. I thought I could live with it, that their approval didn't matter as much as my own self-respect. But I had no idea that their upcoming 40th wedding anniversary wasn't just going to be a party. It was going to be a stage for my ultimate humiliation, and the catalyst for a shift so profound none of us could have seen it coming. I thought it was a chance to finally connect, to show them a piece of my soul. I had no idea it was about to become a battlefield. The catalyst for the explosion was a single piece of creamy cardstock, embossed with gilded script that felt ostentatious to the touch. David and Carol Jensen request the pleasure of your company at a celebration of their 40th wedding anniversary. The party was to be held at the opulent country club they had recently joined, an accomplishment they managed to weave into every conversation as a testament to their social ascent. For them, this wasn't just a milestone, it was a performance, a chance to showcase their success and, by extension, Mark's. As soon as the invitation arrived, a familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. These family functions were always an ordeal. They were carefully orchestrated plays in which I was consistently miscast. I would have to navigate the prying questions from relatives about my life plans, the not-so-subtle comparisons to Mark, and the pitying glances from my own parents that felt more like judgment than concern. The phone call from my mother came a few days later, right on schedule. "Sarah, darling," she began in that sickly sweet tone she reserved for when she was about to make a demand or deliver a criticism wrapped in a backhanded compliment. "Your father and I are so excited about the party. And of course we've been talking about gifts." I was ready for it, steeling myself. "I'm actually making something special for you both," I said, a genuine excitement creeping into my voice despite my apprehension. I had already spent weeks on it, pouring my heart into every detail. "I think you're going to love it." There was a pregnant pause on the other end of the line, so heavy I could almost hear her rolling her eyes. "Making?" she repeated, the word dripping with disdain, as if I'd just confessed to a petty crime. "Sarah, dear, this is our 40th anniversary. It's a very big deal. I'm not sure one of your woodworking projects is really appropriate for the gravity of the occasion." "Oh, Mom, it's not a project," I countered, gripping the phone tighter, trying to keep my voice even. "It's a gift. I'm putting a lot of time and heart into it. It's personal." "I'm sure you are," she said dismissively, her tone making it clear she wasn't sure at all. "But you see, your brother, Mark, is planning something grand. He's sending us on a Mediterranean cruise. That's the kind of gift that fits the occasion, you see." She paused, letting the comparison hang in the air between us like a guillotine. "I just don't want you to be embarrassed when we open the presents in front of everyone." Embarrassed. The word was a punch to the gut. She wasn't worried about my feelings, she was worried about her image. She was worried my gift wouldn't be impressive enough for her audience, that it would reflect poorly on her. "Mom," I said, my voice now cool and distant, "I'm bringing my gift. I'm sure you'll appreciate the thought." The call ended stiffly, and I sat in the silence of my workshop for a long time, the scent of cedar surrounding me. Her words had only hardened my resolve. My gift wasn't just an object, it was a statement. It represented everything. I was a soldier, a craftswoman, a person who believed in values that transcended a price tag. It was a piece of me, and I was determined to give it. Over the next few weeks, I poured every spare moment into the gift. I worked late into the night, the scrape of the chisel and the whisper of sandpaper my only companions. Whenever doubt crept in, my mother's voice echoing in my head, I would look at the piece of wood before me. It wasn't just any wood. It carried history. It carried honor. That was my secret. A secret that I hoped would somehow bridge the chasm between my family and me. I hoped that when they understood the story behind the gift, they would finally understand me. They would see that service and craftsmanship had their own kind of wealth, a kind that couldn't be charged to Mark's American Express card. When I applied the final coat of polish to the box, a swell of pride rose in my chest. It was beautiful, perfect. I wrapped it carefully in simple velvet cloth, placing it in an unassuming box. The presentation didn't matter. The story inside was everything. This grand event, their anniversary, had become the fulcrum of my life. I was pinning all my hopes on a single wooden box, hoping it could repair years of fractures. It was a naive hope, the hope that a single gesture could change deeply ingrained prejudices. I was about to learn a painful lesson that for some people, if something doesn't glitter with gold, it will forever be invisible. The escalation began subtly, like a low-grade fever before the full-blown illness. In the weeks leading up to the party, every interaction with my family was laced with a new layer of dismissiveness and calculation, a coordinated campaign to manage the problem of my gift. The first incident was during a family video call. Mark, framed by the sweeping view of the Manhattan skyline from his corner office, couldn't resist gloating about his gift. He swiveled in his leather chair, a portrait of corporate success. "Just confirmed the booking," he said, a smug grin spreading across his face. 14 days on the most luxurious ship in the fleet. Balcony suite. You'll be treated like royalty, Mom and Dad. "Oh, Mark, that's just wonderful," my mother gushed, clasping her hands to her chest dramatically, as if she were accepting an Oscar. "Your father and I are speechless." "It's nothing," Mark said with a dismissive wave of his hand, a practiced gesture of false modesty. "You deserve it. Besides, it's the least I could do after such a successful year." He then turned his attention to me, the grin still on his face but his eyes cold and challenging. "So, what about you, Sarah? Figured out what to get them yet? Or are you still busy with your little art projects?" The way he spat the words, "art projects," made them sound childish and trivial, like macaroni necklaces. "I have my gift handled, Mark," I said, keeping my voice level, refusing to take the bait. "I made it myself." Mark let out a short, sharp laugh, a bark of condescension that echoed in the speakers. "You made it? Great. Hope you remembered to include the receipt for the materials so they know how much it's worth." He winked at our parents, who offered weak, uncomfortable smiles in return. My father, who usually stayed silent during these exchanges, chimed in, attempting to play peacemaker. "Now, Mark, don't tease your sister. I'm sure Sarah is getting us something lovely." The word lovely was delivered with the same patronizing tone one uses for a toddler's crayon drawing. His weak defense was almost worse than Mark's open mockery. It was a dismissal disguised as support. A few days later, my mother called again. This time, she dispensed with the pleasantries and got straight to her strategy. "Sarah, your father and I have been talking," she said. "We know your finances are probably tight. There would be no shame in just chipping in with Mark. That way, the gift can be from both of us. It would look so much better for everyone." I was stunned by the audacity. "Look better? Mom, this isn't a performance. It's their anniversary gift. It's supposed to be from the heart." "Everything is a performance, dear," she replied, her tone as if she were explaining a basic fact of life to a naive child. "That's how the world works. People see these things. It's about presenting a united, successful front. Just think about it. It would be easier for everyone." She didn't get it. Or rather, she didn't want to. To her, my refusal of this generous offer was an act of stubborn pride. She couldn't see that she was asking me to erase myself, to concede that my efforts were worthless, and my contribution was only valid if it was hidden behind Mark's money. "No, thank you, Mom," I said firmly. "I'm giving my own gift." A frustrated sigh on her end of the line was her only reply before she abruptly hung up. The tension peaked a week before the party. I stopped by my parents' house to pick up some old boxes from the garage. While I was there, I overheard them talking in the next room. They thought I was outside by my truck, their voices carrying clearly through the open kitchen door. "I'm just so worried about Sarah," my mother said, her voice a mixture of frustration and exasperation. "She's being so difficult about this, insisting on bringing that wooden box. What will people think? Our friends, David's business partners. They'll think we raised a failure, that one of our children just couldn't make it." "Carol, calm down," my father said, but his voice was weary, devoid of any defense for me. "We'll just have her open her gift quickly, say thank you, and move on to Mark's. We'll make a big show of his gift. People will forget about hers in a minute. It's just a small, awkward moment." "Oh, a small, awkward moment?" my mother repeated, her voice rising with anxiety. "David, this is our 40th anniversary. I don't want any awkward moments. I want perfection. I want people to be impressed. Mark understands that. Why can't she?" I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart clenching in my chest. They weren't just undervaluing my gift. They were actively plotting to minimize its existence. They saw it as a stain on their perfect evening, a piece of evidence of their perceived parental failure. I slipped out of the house, the boxes forgotten, the sting of betrayal sharp and deep. It wasn't just about a gift anymore. It was about my entire identity being an inconvenience to them. During those days, the only person I could talk to was Dave, my best friend from the Marines. He'd also transitioned to civilian life and was running a small security consulting firm. He was one of the few people who knew the true origin of my gift. "They actually said that?" he asked, his voice tight with a quiet rage on my behalf as I recounted the story over the phone. "Word for word," I confirmed, my own voice hoarse with unshed tears. "Dave, maybe I should just give up. Maybe I should just buy them an expensive espresso machine and be done with it. It's what they want." "No," he said instantly, his tone firm and unwavering. "Don't you dare let them do that to you, Sarah. Don't let their small-mindedness diminish what you've done. That gift, it carries our history. It carries honor. It carries a piece of every soldier and sailor who ever walked that deck. If they can't see that, it's their loss, not yours. You made that for you as much as for them." His words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of surrender. He was right. I had been letting their narrative define me. This gift was more than an attempt to win their approval. It was an homage to the life that had shaped me. It was a tribute to a legacy of service. I would not let them trample on that. I resolved to see it through. I would go to that party, with my head held high, and present my gift with all the pride and respect it deserved. I would give them one last chance to see past the surface, to see the meaning. But as I got ready that Saturday evening, slipping into a simple but elegant dress, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was dressing for battle. I meticulously checked my appearance in the mirror, not out of vanity, but as a soldier inspects their gear. I was preparing for a confrontation. I didn't know how right I was. The clash to come would be worse than I had imagined. It wasn't just going to be an awkward moment. It was going to be a public humiliation. The final drop that would make my cup of endurance overflow forever. The country club was a sea of glittering lights and brittle laughter. Men in expensive suits and women in vibrant cocktail dresses clustered in small, exclusive groups, sipping champagne and exchanging air kisses. My parents were at the center of it all, the king and queen of their self-made court, accepting congratulations with practiced grace. When I arrived, my simply wrapped gift in hand, my mother swept past me with a tense smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sarah, you're here. Put that on the gift table over there," she said, jutting her chin towards a table piled high with glossy boxes and massive silk bows. My gift looked out of place, humble and almost shameful in its simplicity, like a field daisy in a hothouse of exotic orchids. Throughout dinner, I was seated at a table with distant relatives, a strategic placement to keep me out of the main spotlight. I fielded the usual questions about why I hadn't settled down with a polite but firm smile. I watched my brother Mark work the room, charming my father's business partners, telling jokes that made tables erupt in laughter. He was the star, shining brightly, and I was a dim planet in his orbit, my presence acknowledged, but ultimately ignored. Finally, the moment arrived. My father stood, tapping his glass with a fork, a sound that cut through the chatter. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, beaming. "Carol and I are so blessed to have such wonderful friends and family, and we have two amazing children who have been so generous." He paused and winked at Mark, a shared moment of conspiratorial pride. "And now, if you'll indulge us, we'd like to open a few gifts." Ugh! A cold dread washed over me, a physical sensation that started in my stomach and spread through my limbs. The room quieted as a waiter brought the largest presents to the head table. The first one they opened was Mark's. He handed them a large golden envelope with a flourish, milking the moment for all it was worth. "Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad," he said theatrically. My father opened it, and his eyes widened in a display of practiced surprise. "Carol, look at this," he said, his voice filled with awe. He held up the tickets for everyone to see. "A 14-day Mediterranean cruise. First class. Oh, Mark!" My mother began to cry, perfectly calculated tears tracing paths down her cheeks without smudging her makeup. She rose and threw her arms around Mark in a dramatic embrace. "Oh, my darling boy," she sobbed into his shoulder. "This is the most wonderful gift. You are the most wonderful son." The room erupted in applause. Mark took a gracious bow, soaking in the adoration like a plant soaking in the sundae. "Then," my father said, his voice losing its previous excitement, "and now, something from our lovely daughter, Sarah." He picked up my unassuming box. The room was quiet, but this time it was a curious, almost awkward silence. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me. I held my breath as my father unwrapped the paper and lifted out the wooden box. For a moment, there was absolute silence as they looked at it. The box was made of a deep, rich cherry wood, polished to a mirror shine. The dovetail joints were perfect, and on the lid, I had delicately carved the image of our family tree, with their names at the base. It was, by any standard, a beautiful piece of craftsmanship. "Oh," my mother said, her voice flat and utterly devoid of warmth. "It's rustic." Mark let out a laugh, a sneering sound he didn't bother to hide. It cut through the silence like a knife. "Rustic? Mom, that's a polite word for cheap. It looks like something she made in high school shop class." A few people at the nearby tables tittered nervously. My father awkwardly set the box down, as if it were contaminated. "Thank you, Sarah. It's very thoughtful." He didn't even try to open it. He was following their plan perfectly. Acknowledge it quickly and move on. But Mark wasn't going to let it go. "Wait," he said, getting up and striding over, enjoying his role as the master of ceremonies. "We have to see what's inside. Maybe there's a $10 gift card to Home Depot." He picked up the box, contempt written all over his face as he dangled it for the audience. "Mark, stop," I said, my voice barely a whisper, trembling with a mixture of anger and humiliation. "Oh, relax, sis," he said, flipping open the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of navy blue velvet, were two exquisitely crafted fountain pens, their barrels made from the same wood with polished brass fittings. "Pens?" Mark said, his voice dripping with disbelief as he held one up. "You got them a box and two pens? Did you run out of money for the cruise tickets?" That was it. That was the final straw. It wasn't Mark's mockery. It was my mother's next words. She looked directly at me from across the room, her face a mask of cold disappointment, a queen judging a peasant. She said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, her voice cutting and clear, "Well, Sarah, I suppose it's the thought that counts, if there was one." My world stopped. The public humiliation, the complete and utter dismissal of not just the gift, but of me. She wasn't just devaluing an object. She was devaluing my effort, my heart, my soul, everything I had poured into that piece. All the years of feeling invisible, all the times I'd been brushed aside, it all coalesced in that one cruel moment. Anger, cold and pure, rose up inside me, extinguishing the hurt. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room fell silent. Every eye was on me. I looked at my brother's smug face, my mother's icy one, and my father's weak, complicit one. "Don't touch it," I said, my voice dangerously low and steady, a tone they had never heard from me before. Mark smirked. "Or what? You'll throw sawdust at me?" I locked my eyes on his. I said, "Put the box down. Neither you nor they are worthy of touching it." In that instant, something inside me didn't break. It forged itself into steel. They had made their choice. Now, it was time for me to make mine. I walked out of that country club into the stunned silence, leaving a wake of whispers and curious stares behind me. I wasn't fleeing. I was making a strategic retreat. Every step was deliberate, fueled by a cold fury that had replaced years of quiet hurt. As I pulled my truck out of the parking lot, tires crunching on the gravel, my phone rang. It was Dave. He knew the party was tonight and was calling to check in. A lifeline in the storm. "I did it," I said, my voice surprisingly even, almost detached. "I gave them the gift." "And?" he asked, a note of caution in his voice. He knew my family, and they laughed in my face. Literally, in front of about 100 of their closest friends. I told him everything: Mark's jeers, my mother's cruel words, my father's complicit silence. I described the scene with the clinical precision of an after-action report. Dave was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice held no pity, only a shared, cold anger. "Did they leave it there? On the table?" "Yeah," I said, glancing in my rearview mirror as the glittering lights of the club disappeared. "On the table like a piece of trash." "All right," he said, his voice shifting, becoming more focused. "Then it's time for Plan B. Do you want me to make the call? I can have a team there in the morning." "No," I said, a resolve I didn't know I possessed rising in me like a tide. "This one, I have to make myself." My secret weapon wasn't something I could hold in my hand. It was the truth. And it had a name, a rank, and a voice that commanded attention far beyond the walls of any country club. The next morning, I was up before the Sunday I hadn't slept. Instead of lying in bed stewing in self-pity, I had spent the night planning, mapping out my counteroffensive. I put on my best outfit, not a dress, but a pair of sharply creased trousers, a crisp button-down shirt, and a tailored blazer. It wasn't a suit of armor. It was a uniform of a different kind, one that projected competence and control. At 0800 hours sharp, I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Commander's office," Lieutenant Miller speaking. A professional voice answered. "Lieutenant? This is Discharged Sergeant Sarah Jensen," I said, my voice firm and clear, the military cadence returning naturally. "I need to speak with Commander Thompson. It's regarding Project Historic Oak." There was a subtle shift in the lieutenant's tone, a recognition of the project code. "One moment, Sergeant." Seconds later, a deep, authoritative voice came on the line. "Jensen, I was hoping to hear from you. Did everything go well?" This was Commander Robert Thompson, a man whose presence could make generals stand a little straighter. He was a historian, a sailor, and the head curator of the USS Constitution Museum. And he was the man who had personally granted me access to something priceless. "Commander, sir," I began, my voice steady. "There's been a change in plans. The artifacts were delivered, but their security has been compromised. I am officially requesting your assistance in their immediate retrieval." I explained briefly what had happened, leaving out the messy family drama and sticking to the facts with military precision. The gift had been publicly rejected, its value unrecognized, and it was currently sitting in an unsecured civilian home, treated as a common object. Commander Thompson listened without interruption, the silence on his end more potent than words. "I see, Sergeant," he said when I finished, a clear note of disapproval in his voice. "That is an unacceptable outcome. The legacy of those who served on that ship deserves more respect. Give me the address. I will handle this personally. ETA, 1,100 hours. Thank you, Commander, sir. No thanks necessary, Jensen. We take care of our own, and we protect our history." The call ended, and I sat there, feeling the full weight of the U.S. military and American history at my back. It was a powerful, steadying feeling. The secret of the box was in the wood itself. 2 years prior, during a visit to Boston, I had volunteered on the restoration project for the USS Constitution, Old Ironsides. During the work, a few of the original white oak deck planks, dating back to the 1792nd, were being replaced. These pieces of wood, too small for reuse on the ship but too precious to discard, were reserved for special museum projects. I had submitted a formal proposal to Commander Thompson to allow me, a veteran and a woodworker, to use one of these pieces to create an heirloom, an item to honor the legacy of service. Impressed by my skill and my reverence for the material, he agreed, on one condition. The box and its contents would officially be classified as a long-term loan from the museum, subject to recall at any time if it was not being properly honored and secured. The paperwork was official, signed and filed. Inside the box, the pens weren't just pens. They were crafted from the same historic wood, and inside each one, carefully encapsulated by a museum specialist, was a tiny fragment, a single thread from one of the original American flags that flew on the ship during the War of 1812. They were literal relics. The entire gift wasn't a craft project, it was a curated piece of American history. Its value wasn't $10. It was priceless and, legally, not even mine to give away permanently. My plan was simple. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to cry or plead. I was done with that. I was going to let the institution I respected speak for the values I held dear. I was going to let the authority of a United States Navy dress uniform do the talking. I arrived at my parents' house at 10:45. I parked across the street, my engine off, and just watched. I could see Mark washing his BMW in the driveway, whistling cheerfully, completely oblivious. He didn't even glance my way. To him, I was already a non-entity. At exactly 11, a black government sedan with official plates pulled up to the curb. Commander Robert Thompson stepped out. He was wearing his pristine summer whites, his ribbons and medals gleaming on his chest, his bearing erect and imposing. He looked like he had stepped right off a recruitment poster. I watched Mark stop whistling. His jaw went slack. He just stood there, sponge in hand, water dripping onto the pristine asphalt. Commander Thompson didn't spare Mark a glance. He walked purposefully up the driveway and rang the doorbell. A sharp, authoritative sound. I took a deep breath, opened my car door, and crossed the street. The show was about to begin. My father answered the door in his bathrobe, a newspaper tucked under his arm, a scowl of annoyance on his face at being disturbed on a Sunday morning. The scowl vanished, replaced by an expression of utter confusion as he took in the tall, imposing figure in the immaculate Navy uniform on his doorstep. "Can I help you?" my father stammered, instinctively pulling his robe tighter. "I am Commander Robert Thompson, United States Navy," the commander stated, his voice a clear, crisp baritone that seemed to carry the authority of a battleship. "I'm here to speak with you, David Jensen, and your wife Carol regarding the government property currently in your possession." "Government property?" my father repeated, looking completely lost as he glanced around his manicured lawn. "I think you have the wrong house. We're law-abiding citizens." "I do not make mistakes of that nature, sir," Commander Thompson said firmly, his gaze unwavering. Just then, I stepped up onto the porch, positioning myself just behind the commander's shoulder. It was a position I was familiar with. standing behind a superior officer. "Hi, Dad," I said calmly. My father's eyes darted from the commander to me, and his confusion curdled into a flash of anger. "Sarah, what is this? What have you done now? Did you bring the police to our house?" "He's not the police, Dad. He's my commanding officer," I replied, using the term loosely but effectively. "And he's here about your anniversary gift." My mother, drawn by the commotion, appeared behind my father, clutching a silk robe around herself, her face a mask of irritation. "What on earth is going on?" she demanded. Her face paled when she saw the commander, her social instincts recognizing a level of authority that unsettled her. Mark had abandoned his car and was now standing in the driveway, phone in hand, as if he might record the bizarre event, staring in disbelief. "Mrs. Jensen," Commander Thompson said, giving a curt, polite nod that was more of a dismissal than a greeting. "I believe your daughter presented you with a wooden box last night. I am here to retrieve it. Immediately." "Retrieve it?" My mother scoffed, some of her haughty bravado returning as she found her footing. "It's just an old craft project. If you admire it so much, I'm sure she can make you another one. Now, if you'll excuse us, it's very early." "Ma'am, perhaps I was unclear," the commander interrupted, and his tone left no room for debate. It was the voice of a man used to being obeyed without question. "That box is not an old craft project. It was fashioned from an original white oak plank salvaged from the deck of the USS Constitution during its restoration. It is a historical artifact, property of the United States Navy, and was loaned to your family under the legal and binding understanding that it would be honored." A thick, suffocating silence fell over the porch. The looks on my parents' and Mark's faces were a comical mixture of shock and total disbelief. My mother's hand went to her throat. That can't be right," my father finally managed, his voice a hoarse whisper. "She made it in her workshop." "Oh, quote, I can assure you, sir, it is," the commander replied, his eyes cold. "Sergeant Jensen was granted special permission to work with this material in recognition of her distinguished service to this country. As the gift was apparently not received with the respect it is due, under the terms of our official loan agreement, I am here to reclaim it." He paused, letting the full weight of his words sink in. He let them feel the gravity of what they had dismissed. Furthermore, the relics inside those pens contain encapsulated fragments from a historic battle flag from the War of 1812. They are irreplaceable museum artifacts. Mishandling them, or attempting to sell them, could have serious federal repercussions. My mother looked like she was about to faint. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing but no sound coming out. The word federal seemed to have short-circuited her brain. Mark was the first to find his voice, which dripped with his usual arrogance, though it was now tinged with uncertainty. "This is a joke, right? This has to be a joke. Sarah, did you hire an actor to scare us?" Commander Thompson turned his head slowly, a movement that was both deliberate and menacing, and fixed Mark with a gaze as hard as steel. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The sheer force of his presence was overwhelming. "Young man," the commander said, his voice low and dangerous, "I assure you I am not an actor, and I find nothing amusing about disrespecting this nation's history or the veterans who have served it." Mark visibly shrank back, his bravado instantly evaporating. "Now," the commander said, turning back to my parents, his voice returning to its official, commanding tone, "if you would please bring me the box." My father, looking 10 years older, turned and shuffled inside without a word. He returned moments later, holding the box with both hands as if it were a live bomb. He extended it to Commander Thompson with a reverence that was sickeningly ironic given the events of the previous night. The commander took the box, inspecting it carefully to ensure it was undamaged. He ran a gloved finger over the carving on the lid. He nodded in satisfaction before turning to me, his entire demeanor softening. "Sergeant Jensen," he said, his voice now filled with warmth and respect, "on behalf of the United States Navy, I apologize that our heritage and your dedication were treated so dismissively. This is a magnificent piece of craftsmanship. You do the uniform proud." Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the crisp white of his uniform. I snapped to attention out of pure reflex, my back straight, my chin up. "Thank you, Commander, sir." He gave me another nod, a small, encouraging smile touching his lips for the first time. Then he cast one final, ice-cold look at my parents and Mark, a look that said more than words ever could. "You have a good day," he said, the words a clear dismissal. He turned on his heel and walked back to his car, carrying the box with the care it deserved. As the sedan pulled away, we were left in a heavy, suffocating silence. Mark's smugness had evaporated, replaced by a pasty look of confusion and fear. My parents looked utterly broken, their perfect world shattered by a reality they couldn't comprehend. "Sarah," my mother began, her voice a ragged whisper. We didn't know." "No, you didn't," I said, and for the first time my voice held all the years of disappointment and hurt, untempered by a need to please. "That's the whole point. You never bothered to know. You never bothered to look past a price tag. You look at me, and you don't see a soldier or a craftsman. You just see a disappointment because I'm not Mark." I turned to my brother. "And you?" I said, my voice cutting. "You can buy them the world, Mark, but you will never understand the value of things that can't be bought. Loyalty, honor, sacrifice. You laughed at me, but I just feel sorry for you. Your world is so small." Finally, I looked at my father, and you just stood there. You always just stand there, never saying a word in my defense. Your silence was louder than their insults. I took a deep breath, feeling a lightness spread through my chest. "I'm done," I said softly, but with absolute finality. "I'm done fighting for your approval. You have your golden child. Enjoy that cruise." I didn't wait for a response. I turned, walked down the driveway, and didn't look back. As I got in my truck, I felt a strange, profound sense of release. The final battle was over. I may have lost the war for their affection, but I had won back my self-respect. Driving away from that street felt like shrugging off a heavy rucksack I had carried my entire life. The silence in my truck wasn't empty, it was peaceful. For the first time, there were no critical voices in my head, no impulse to justify my existence. There was only the steady hum of the engine and the open road ahead, a road that finally felt like my own. I didn't go straight home. I drove to my workshop. The familiar, earthy smell of pine and linseed oil greeted me like an embrace. This was my sanctuary, a place where my worth was measured in skill and patience, not bank balances and social standing. I spent the rest of the day working, losing myself in the rhythm of my tools, keeping my hands busy while my mind processed the day's upheaval. Every pass of the hand plane, every turn of a clamp, was an act of reclaiming myself, of smoothing out the rough edges of my own spirit. That evening, my phone buzzed incessantly, a barrage of calls from my mother, a string of desperate texts from my father, even a long, rambling email from Mark, full of excuses and justifications. I didn't answer a single one. I put my phone on silent. I needed space. I needed to rebuild my walls, but this time, I would build them in a healthy place to protect my peace, not to imprison myself in loneliness. The first few days were strange. The silence from my family was a relief at first, a blessed quiet after a lifetime of noise. But then, a familiar ache crept in. No matter how they had treated me, they were still my family. I realized I was grieving, not for them, but for the family I had always wished they were. I was mourning the relationship I had always wanted, not the one I actually had. My friend, Dave, became my rock. He didn't offer platitudes, he offered his presence. "You did the right thing, Sarah," he told me over a beer a few nights later. "You stood up for yourself. That takes a hell of a lot of courage." I But now I feel so alone, I admitted, the confession a quiet whisper. You're not alone, he said, his voice firm. You've got me. You've got your fellow vets. You've got your craft. You're building a life on your terms, not theirs. That's not loneliness. That's freedom. It just feels quiet at first. He was right. I started channeling all my energy into my workshop with a renewed sense of purpose. I launched a professional website to showcase my pieces. I started taking commissions from people outside my immediate circle, clients who found me through word of mouth. Slowly, something amazing began to happen. People loved my work. They appreciated the craftsmanship, the clean lines, the quality of the wood. They didn't ask what it cost first. They asked about the story behind it. About a month after the confrontation, I got an email from a downtown art gallery that specialized in artisan crafts. The owner had seen my work online and wanted to feature a few of my pieces in an upcoming exhibition of local artisans. It was a kind of validation I had never dared to dream of, and it came from a complete stranger who saw nothing but the merit of my work. Meanwhile, I heard bits and pieces about my family through the grapevine of relatives who called, ostensibly to check on me, but really to get the gossip. The anniversary party had become a cautionary tale. The commander's visit had sent shockwaves through their social circle. My parents had isolated themselves, too embarrassed to face the friends who had witnessed my humiliation. Mark's cruise, the grand gesture meant to cement his status, now had a bitter aftertaste. I heard they went, but that the trip was tense and quiet, haunted by what had happened. The biggest change for me was the absence of pressure. No more expectant phone calls. No more stressful family dinners where I felt like a defendant on trial. I could breathe. I could just be without having to edit myself. I started attending a local veterans group, connecting with men and women who shared my experiences. There, I didn't have to explain myself. We spoke the same language of service, of sacrifice, and of the challenging road of reintegration. I was building my new dawn, one built on a solid foundation of self-worth. The house I grew up in may have closed its doors to me, but in doing so, they had inadvertently opened up the world. I was realizing that family isn't just the people you share blood with. It's the people who see you, who respect you, and who have your back, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. My journey was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I was heading in the right direction, guided by my own compass. 10 months can change everything. For me, it was the time it took to turn a humble workshop into a thriving business, and, more importantly, a life. After the successful gallery exhibition, the commissions started pouring in. The name Sarah Jensen, Woodworks, began to mean something in artisan circles, a mark of quality, of attention to detail, of an artist who could make wood sing. I hired my first apprentice, a young Air Force veteran who was also searching for purpose after her service. Together, we weren't just making furniture, we were building a community, a small haven of focus and craft. I moved into a larger loft apartment above my workshop. The space was open and filled with light, with exposed brick walls that I left bare. It wasn't as glamorous as Mark's condo, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and sterile, modern aesthetic, but it was mine. And every single thing in it, from the sturdy dining table to the solid bed frame, was made by my own hands. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, unshakably financially secure. The peace I'd found came not from a big bonus, but from the quiet confidence that I could rely on my own skill and hard work to build a life. Meanwhile, my family's world, once so shiny and perfect on the surface, had begun to fracture from the inside. Justice, it turns out, isn't always delivered by a judge's gavel. Sometimes, it's the slow, inevitable erosion of a foundation built on the wrong values. Mark's firm went through a major restructuring. Market volatility, he told relatives with a forced casualness. But the truth, pieced together from whispers from a cousin who worked in the financial district, was that Mark had made several high-risk, arrogant trades that had backfired spectacularly. He wasn't the invincible financial genius he and my parents believed him to be. He was just a man who got lucky for a while. He was demoted, his massive bonus slashed to a fraction of its former glory. The sleek BMW was traded in for a more modest sedan. The extravagant lifestyle he had used to define his worth, and by which my parents had defined theirs, was beginning to crumble. Without the armor of wealth, he was just an insecure man with a bad attitude. Without Mark's shining success to hide behind, my parents were forced to confront the emptiness in their own lives. Their friends from the country club grew distant. The incident at the party had left an indelible stain. It hadn't just revealed their cruelty toward me, but a disturbing and shallow core that made people uncomfortable. They had lost the social currency they craved, the very thing they had sacrificed their daughter for. Their large house started to feel less like a castle and more like a quiet, lonely museum of their own making. The first call came on a Tuesday night, 10 months after the party. It was my mother. Her voice had lost its sharp, confident edge. It was thin and hesitant. "Sarah?" she said, as if unsure I would answer. I was just calling to see how you were." We had a short, stilted conversation. She told me about Mark's struggles, about their loneliness, about how quiet the house was. She didn't apologize, not in so many words, but there was a tacit admission in her tone, a weariness that spoke of regret, a recognition that their world had been shaken to its core. A few weeks later, my father showed up at my workshop unannounced. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking out of place amidst the sawdust and tools, like a man who had taken a wrong turn. He walked around, running his hand over a half-finished chair, his eyes taking in the details of the joinery with a look of genuine wonder. "You're really good at this," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I know," I replied softly, without a hint of smugness. It was just a fact. He finally turned to me, and his eyes were filled with a sadness I had never seen before. "We were wrong, Sarah," he said, the words coming out slowly, as if they were heavy. "I was wrong. I was so caught up in what Mark had, I forgot to look at who you are. I let my silence be my consent to how your mother and brother treated you. And for that, I am truly sorry." They were the words I had waited a lifetime to hear. And when they came, they didn't bring a triumphant rush of "I told you so," but a quiet, sad sense of release, like a muscle that had been clenched for decades finally letting go. "Thank you, Dad," I said, and I meant it. Our relationship didn't magically heal overnight. It wasn't a fairy tale. We began to rebuild it, piece by piece, on a new foundation of honesty and, for the first time, mutual respect. They started visiting my workshop, not to judge, but to watch me work, asking quiet questions about the different types of wood and the tools I used. My mother even commissioned me to build her a small bookshelf. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was a transaction. She paid me in full, insisting on it. It was a sign of respect, an acknowledgement that my time and my talent had value. I established clear